Hey guys, this is Bridget, and today we're going to be talking about the shadow, darkness, how to integrate it, how to bring it up, how to look at it, how to work with it, all of these different things. People have talked about shadow work a lot, but I want to give you my perspective, especially because I'm really into positive orientation, but showing you how much the darkness has taught me to actually go into the light. So that's what I want to go over, as well as expanding into the deeper layers of shadow in soul work as you really start to expand your consciousness and see and perceive these other realms, the deeper layers that will come up, which is super interesting and really fun. So let's go into these tools, and we're first going to go into shadow work, what that means on a human personal level, and then we're going to go deeper and deeper into these unseen layers. What is shadow work? Well, it says it in its name, something in the shadow. So something in the shadow is something not in the light, something that is been maybe suppressed, pushed away. So in our personal lives, this happens a ton. We grow up and we're children and we get traumatized, or things happen to us, or we have to suppress certain aspects of ourselves. And all of these things then push part of who we are, our soul, into the shadow, into somewhere that is unable to be seen and expressed, right? Which can also be the unconscious, because it starts to become not a part of your conscious memory, conscious expression, actually what this piece of you is. So these parts of yourself are oftentimes the most sensitive, the most special, the most sacred, the parts of you that have all of your extrasensory abilities. And these are the parts that, through cultural conditioning or trauma, whatever, all this stuff, have gotten shoved out. And through processes like soul retrieval, shamanic soul retrieval, and different trauma releases, and just conscious awareness, going back to those times and bringing back these pieces, we can come back into wholeness. And I have a whole video on how to connect in with your inner child again on this level to do that work. So go over and check that out if you haven't already. So going now into this idea of these unintegrated aspects. When they're not integrated, what starts to happen? They start to fester, right? Anything like, even if it's like a cut, and if it's in like a Band-Aid, this is gonna get gross, and it's like, not getting light, it's not getting oxygen, it starts to fester, and then things start to happen to it, to where it starts to change. It loses its essence of purity. And so that's what often happens to these parts of us that are unexpressed, that come out in creepy and crappy ways. This can be something that you just like lash out at someone and you're like, I don't know where that came from. Or these certain habits start, right? Coping mechanisms, from disassociation and stuff like that. These kinds of things can start occurring, so it can ripple out into our lives. And the key to all of this, and why I'm even talking about this, is we need all of ourselves. We need our wholeness back to fully ascend and become who we truly are. So we have to go get these little parts of us. Now, that's mostly inner child work. You can have things that become disassociated as a teenager, as an adult. So, any time along your lifeline, even in birth and the birthing process, which I'm going to do more videos on as well. So anywhere along those lines, these parts of you can get pushed out. And this is basic shadow work understanding from a human perspective. So look into this kind of stuff. And at the end of the video, I'll explain some ways that you can begin to identify these parts of yourself, because the craziest part is you're like fishing in the dark. Literally, you're fishing in the dark because you can't even remember, because it's in the subconscious, what it actually was. So I'm going to go over some tools how to retrieve and begin to bring to consciousness these parts. But before I do that, I want to go deeper into the next level, into the next layer that's been coming up really strong. So as we become more light, we perceive more darkness. That's the way that it goes. It's like shining a light, and then all of a sudden this other aspect of consciousness, or the reality, or people, is illuminated. You can see layers and layers deep. And I've had this for a long time, and sometimes it's not so fun because you start with the persona, and then you go beyond that, and then you can see other people's lives, and then you can see the motivations and all of this stuff behind what's actually going on. And as I studied with my different shamanic teachers, we went into this because what happens on a deeper shadow level, on a soul aspect, we start to get into other things. So you have the three primary things in this incarnation of things that can bring stuff up or suppress things away. But what you have too is you have conditioning from the collective, that, these thoughts and feelings and impulses that might not be yours at all. You got ancestral stuff that is unfinished, again, like kind of shadow stuff that comes up and manifests through you because it hasn't been looked at. And then there's the other aspect of parallel lives as well that have a big influence on us. So there's a lot of different components that are influencing this time space. And it simply comes to light. All of this shadow or unintegrated or hidden stuff comes to light through simple acknowledgement, seeing it, because in that space it instantly becomes conscious. And then when you have that conscious awareness, then it becomes choice. And that's when I love being in this positive space and positive orientation, because positive beliefs always have a choice. And so when you're in this space of bringing up this angry part of you, or this suppressed part, or this super dark part, and you have this crazy dream or whatever it is, at that moment when it becomes conscious, you have the choice, and you can then reclaim and befriend and utilize the power of whatever that was, even if it's dark, for good, for the goodness of yourself and for the goodness of others. And that is what totally lights me up. And in movies it's conveyed, oh, but no, you will be tempted back. And it's not quite that way. So let's go into that a little bit. So what I've been observing in the collective as different people in spiritual and non-spiritual positions get more power, it all of a sudden starts to resonate, have this resonance field with certain times that those certain people have had power before. So yeah, it could be like an inner child thing of like, I finally get to control things. Yeah, sure, it can be that. But it starts to get deep and it starts to get powerful, because these other times, these other lifetimes where certain people say have been like this maleficent king or, a tyrant, or other times where people have been hyper-victimized too. We're going to get into that in a second. Those times have such potency because they were so big in its manifestation and presence that sometimes they can ripple through time to this present time. And that's why you need to do like past life healing or stuff like that, because it's influencing this time space. And those usually come up when there's a resonance with where you're at right now. It starts to resonate with that certain time. And so as these certain people come into these power positions, all of a sudden, if it's not brought to consciousness and not consciously aware, then subconsciously this other thing that might not have the best intentions can take over with ill motivation. And so it becomes very interesting. And I just watched the new Osho documentary on Netflix. I recommend you going and watching it. Wild Wild West? No, it's something like that. You'll find it. And it was so deeply stirring. It's really, really intense, but it's very good to see. It's very good to look at this stuff. It's very good to look into it consciously. Because the thing is those shadows aspects of ourselves, whether it's coming from this bigger influence or just within ourselves, it is all us, can be easily seen and witnessed. And it kind of starts to become obvious. So I'm going to get into a little bit of how to identify these things. And Patrick did a really great video on utilizing the reality mirror to figure out what these aspects of you are. So I recommend going and watching that, because so much of the stuff that we do together, we influence each other's work, and so it's really important to go check that out as like another angle to this conversation. So it becomes really obvious. For instance, say if you're like, okay, the gun stuff going on, it's like, take away guns. But then Friday night rolls around and we go to the new Tom Cruise gun movie. Do you see how there's like a disconnect? And it's like, well, why would you do that? If you say no to guns, then you say no to guns in all aspects of your consciousness, those kinds of things. Or if there's this like burning desire to like watch Game of Thrones, and it's kind of like dark and like dirty and kind of evil, and it's like, what is this? That's a part of your consciousness that wants to be seen. It's a part of you. So this is where it gets dicey, because we've done it all. We've done it all. And the more that you open your extrasensory abilities, the more that you're going to realize this. And it gets like icky. You've been the saint. Yes, you've been Joan of Arc and the high priestess of Egypt. You've done those things, but you've also been the person to commit mass genocide. And when we start to realize this, then a few things happen. One, the elitism of like, I am the righteousness of the light, or like, I'm better than you, which then creates hierarchy, which then isn't oneness, which then becomes weird. It balances that. It goes, you know what? I've done it all. And so there's a humility that comes in. And in the space when this realization comes, and it's come for me, obviously, you can feel, when this realization comes, what you do with it then at that point is you bring it as close to you and as present as possible to your heart. So you hold that dark past or that dark energy in your heart so that you never forget about it. So it never goes into the unconscious. So it never subconsciously manifests outward towards others. It stays very close to you. And this doesn't have to be a thing, because I see people doing shadow work and they like grind and grind for years, digging out the closet, and it doesn't really require that. One of the ways to get into this space and to identify these things actually is through presence, but not in presence in the form of wanting to escape, because this can get into the Luciferian and Ahrimanic dynamic, which me and Patrick are going to do a video on, because it's very important, because sometimes you can get so light, intoxicated by the light, that it's actually an escape mechanism not to look at other aspects, as well as it's this energy that has its own agenda itself. And so in that state, when we're saying presence, it's complete mindlessness and stillness. And in those spaces, this stuff wants to come up. It's like natural. It's kind of like when you go on a cleanse and you stop eating and just drink water or something. The body naturally wants to detox, and our souls are kind of that way too. It's like it's bubbling to the surface, and the second you give it the opportunity, which is through the stillness of mind and through the connection into your heart, then these things will start to come up. And when you ask, and when you invite, and when you say, I am courageous enough to see this, I am courageous enough to deal with this, because I think that's part of it, is like the fear of what that's going to look like. And it is kind of scary, at times, whether you're on the victim or the perpetrator side. And both of those are opposite sides of the same coin. So just as much as you can get into the perpetration, the victimhood is just the same level of consciousness, and we're wanting to integrate those two so that we have an understanding that we're not powerless and we don't misuse our power. So we're coming to that space, and by keeping it strongly in our heart and strongly present, and just in that space of presence letting it come up, it will be a visceral experience to where you'll go, okay, and you don't need to dig much. You're like, okay, it's right there, and I'm gonna hold it and always remember this. And I feel like this is very important to talk about now with the different stages that you guys are at of your spiritual journey. Because as you come into these greater levels of power, empowerment, influence, that those parts that resonate with that level of power that you may have had another time can come in and be weird and not be necessarily the best thing for humanity. It has other intentions involved, and I just am seeing this. I saw this in the Osho documentary, and I can see it in kind of some of the other people in leadership positions. And so it's very important to just look at now, because then when you get to that point, you go, oh, I already decided. I remember what's here. I remember who I am. I have already decided what my beliefs are, that I'm going to take care of fully, equally, each person and each being in creation as myself. And so it's that clarity and it's that precision of choice towards light that actually has a lot of fuel to it. It's not just a flame that's buzzing. It's like a deep burning fire, because you've been in the coals and you've felt it, you've seen it. And so it has this robust nature to it that can only be experienced through fully going into it. And the other thing too that's really interesting, and I think a lot of this tainted frequency and perspective around darkness and the shadow has come from the suppression of, say, the feminine and magic and those kinds of things. Sometimes for good reason, because there's crazy sorcerer stuff, that has happened in the past. And you'll start to feel that sometimes when you get deeper into this energy, is the relationship of the sun and the solar and the light and the moon and the lunar, and how going into the shadow, which going deeper into it is going into the void of creation, going into the cosmos. There's this strong power, because it's pure source energy, and it's strong and it's light, but it's coming from the blackness, is where light emerges, right? Like from the womb is where life births. So it's as Patrick says in one of his songs, it's like planting seeds in fertile shadows. And that space is dynamic, and it has so much to teach us. And we've kind of hidden away from it because we're scared, but to go into it is to retrieve our power, is to retrieve the feminine, is to retrieve this other energy within ourselves, which is exquisitely beautiful, and also to see and acknowledge these other energies that might not be, and then hold them close to your heart. So how do you bring these up? How do you look at it? Well, we talked about a little bit about the reality mirror, which is in Patrick's video, and we're also looking at just the path of least resistance, which is like, okay, what are you interested in, and what are you polarized by? Because there are certain things like, just like conspiracy that's on the darker side and you're interested in it. There's a reason that part of you wants to move, and sometimes it's good to let those parts of you play out so that it doesn't manifest negatively. So if you do want to be powerful or recognized or like a celebrity, let yourself speak, let yourself get on a pedestal and do that, so that it doesn't have to come out in a negative way. So sometimes it's a matter of giving awareness to it and understanding yourself to know what that part of you needs to then integrate with the light aspect. And this is the big point, is getting to know yourself, because there's so many different energies and influences, and slowly but surely, if you just tick off the different boxes and you're like, okay, I've explored the ancestry, I've explored my inner child, I've explored this, I've explored, and then it's like, okay, you're really starting to hone in on what is you and what is your energy. And then, of course, going to the higher level, which is you are pure source infinity, which is everything. And from that space, if there's ever any fear or like unknown or what do I do, it's always go into that solid space. And then the information of what to do in the most balanced way will come from that highest perspective. So a few other things that you can do to bring these energies up. One, ask around, because it's so funny how like the really good quality friends and family that you trust can kind of see the shortcomings. And it's not just like, okay, well, you have an issue with this. It's not trying to get into that, but it's actually like, hey, is there any part of me that you can feel that might need to be expressed that isn't, or any part of me that is negative or dark that I could work on, you know? And just that will start to open the conversation, whether it's with someone else, and of course inviting your own consciousness to show it, to reveal itself to you. So of course being in presence and in meditation, it can come up, and in this space of opening and welcoming it can come to you in dream time. It can come to you through just visions. You can do shamanic journeying, you can do regressions, you can do anything like that to just start to bring it up. I feel like the real seed is through the courage and that knowingness that you can face anything, that you are that strong. And once you do, then you bring in that part of you. And then you become even stronger because you've looked at it, you've faced it, and that part of you, even if it's malicious, even if it's like deeply victimized or whatever, that is power in and of itself. It might be muffled, but it is power. And so just allowing it to come back into yourself and then consciously moving about so that you can do the best for yourself and the world. And noticing again the things that might shock you, because there's things you might just be fascinated with, and that is probably an inside information as to maybe something related to your resonance that's going on, that wants to come up. But also the things that polarize and shock you and trigger you are probably something too that you might have going on, or you fear might happen to you. So when you look at a leader, or when you look at whatever it is, and it's like, I hate when they're doing that, or I cannot believe that they would do that, you know, or these deep things. It's like, well, realize that maybe you did, and that's why it's polarizing. So it starts to take a lot of self-honesty and a lot of self-inquiry, and it's really important to begin looking at these things, because this awakening journey, ascension, is honestly like a soul university that has prerequisites, and you do one thing at a time, maybe out of order. You take this class first and then you take this one, but eventually you're going to get to these higher and higher levels as your consciousness expands, as your abilities increase, as you get more on your mission, and the other things have to be done. Like, it's like, oh, well, you can't go having your alien contact experiences if you haven't integrated your inner child. Like, there's these certain levels and layers to it. So in this, I'm giving you some of the deeper, more expansive ones, and to go look at any of the other ones that you might missed, you know, the Ancestry 101 kind of a thing. And so going to them and whatever form, whatever resonates, going through these levels will ultimately lead you to the most balanced place as you raise your consciousness. Because some of the time, especially with my generation and younger, who are just blasting light beams from these other dimensions, they can align to that pure frequency. They can bring that through. But these other unconscious and subconscious pieces are just running wild, or not seen, not integrated. So you can always know if something's in alignment with yourself, or in alignment from the best place, through what the motivations are, what motivated you to make that decision, you know. And that's where you can go, is it ego? Is it like wealth, sex, and power? Is it this, that, or this? And it's okay if it is one of those things. It just needs to be acknowledged that it is one of those things. right? And that you might need to play it out. And I talk about this in my Exiting the 3D. Like some energies you just need to play out and experience, and that might be watching a movie. But just making sure that you don't go too deep into it and then you get lost, like, swimming around in your shadows or your issues or your problems. It's like then you got to come back to that center. You got to come back to that place of who you truly are, because you need to stay at this frequency of connection to go look at it and then integrate it as power, rather than just falling over and getting lost and swallowed up into it, and vice versa if you go too high, and then it's an escapism. So there's a lot of balance involved. So it's very exciting. I feel like we're really going into some deep, deep times of amazing transformation, bold moves from you guys, just changing your lives, changing yourselves internally, really going for it. And I'm just beyond impressed, really, really impressed. And so as much as I can bring through these higher markers along the way that can assist you, I'm happy to do so. So thank you so much for watching. If you have any additional questions, please comment below, because this is a deep subject. It's not like for one video. It just continues on to infinity and webs out and webs out. So it's really interesting. I can do more on it. But thank you so much for watching. And if you like videos like this, please subscribe and click the bell so that you get notifications about new videos from me. And be sure to follow me on Instagram for daily updates, and Facebook, and just let's connect in. So I got lots of great stuff in store, some really good programs and things to assist the tribe in this ascension process coming up here in the next couple months. So stay tuned for that. And I really appreciate you watching. New video next week. Love you.